Shalom from Jerusalem. My name is Albert Wexler. I'm the director of Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast, and we are here with answers for allies. We are at the Friends of Zion Museum, and together with me is the former Knesset member, Ksenia Svetlova. And I'm really, really happy that you agreed to come. You're a very, very busy person. Of course, we've known each other for a few years. You came to the first Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast in London in 2019, and then you came to Washington with us, and so there's been a few events we've had together. But
it's a pleasure to be here, Albert. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming. You're an expert in Middle Eastern affairs, an expert on radical Islam. You are a senior research fellow at the Institute of Policy and Strategy at Herzliya, and it's a great honor to have you here. Now, you said for years, no deal with Hamas. Israel cannot make any deal with Hamas. Now, well, here we are today.
It was tragic to realize that there were many people like me, apparently, because now, you look back to things that you've written, things that you said, and I know that also in the party that I was a part of, Hatnoah, my friend Yoel Hasson also said, practically in the same terms, you cannot make peace with radical fundamentalist Islamic movement, a terrorist movement that wants to live here instead of us, not next to us. There is no room for compromise. We knew that, and for me especially, Albert, that prior to my work in the Knesset, I used to cover the Middle East as a journalist.
You're very well known as a journalist.
And I also worked in Gaza between 2002.
You did?
I did, yes. I went there many times. There were some times during the Intifada, 2003, 2004, 2005, until the end of 2006. I was there, sometimes once in 2 weeks, sometimes once a week, for interviews. I interviewed all of the Hamas leaders, like all of them. Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, the spiritual leader, the founder of the Hamas, the current leaders, Ismail Haniyeh, Mahmoud Azar, many others as well. And I can tell you that apart from the endless hatred, not only for Israelis as Israelis, but also for Jews specifically. Mahmoud Azar told me in one of the interviews when he thought that, we ended the recording, he told me, we will fight the Jews till Yom Al-Qiyamah. Yom Al-Qiyamah, it's the day of resurrection, the judgment day, so what can you get from that, Albert? So when I saw that, that unfortunately our political leaders for years choose to, go for some kind of compromise, as you can compromise, with fanatics that see blindly that they have to continue this fight, even though they sacrifice their own people. I always said that Hamas is, first of all, the worst enemy of its own people, much more than of Israelis and Jews, with all of the trauma and the tragedy that we live in. But they completely ruined lives of millions of people, of their own people. So it's a tragedy for both people.
And of course, they have no remorse, they have no regrets. They say we would do it again. October 7, where did it find you?
Well, we have a small child. She is 4 years old. So bless her heart, she wakes us up quite early. So by 6:30, I was already awakened. She came to our bed. And then I looked at my phone, because usually I'm switching it off at night, but I switched it on by 6:30, and that's when the notifications about the rocket fire came. And there were plenty. I was immediately logging into all of the news websites to understand what is going on. It was unprecedented attack. We learned after that there were 3,000 rockets fired just in one day. One day only, 3,000 rockets. Can you imagine this? So this is something, of course, all of them, intended for civilians. All of them for civilian targets. The Western world doesn't speak about that at all. It's like the rocket fire didn't exist. But then I started receiving videos from friends, also from some Palestinian friends, who called to ask me how I am. And I told them, why do you ask? I mean, yes, there is rocket fire, but is there something else? They told me, yes, we hear that there is a breakthrough the fence between Gaza and the Gaza envelope in Israel, and there is infiltration of terrorists. And I looked into Hamas channels on Telegram. In Telegram they thrive. It's the chosen platform. And I saw, images that I couldn't believe in my life that I'm going to see this. Them on the, land of Israel, killing getting Israelis, just dragging them into Gaza itself. I understood that it was a tragedy of the, it's not only national scale, it's international scale, because this is something that completely shook not only us, but the whole of the Middle East and probably the whole world.
Now, why weren't we ready? I mean, it's obvious Israel has the best intelligence. Israel has been boasting of our best army, and suddenly we are caught in such a situation.
Well, I will mention a reason that is rarely discussed. It's arrogance. Arrogance, because you cannot underestimate your enemy, Albert. This is what was done also in 1973, before the war of the Yom Kippur, of the October War. We disrespected the Egyptians. The military command said, Sadat, he cannot make peace, he cannot make war. He did both peace, both first war and then peace. As for Hamas, of course, there are no intentions there for peace. But I think that for years, they were growing stronger. And we saw, I think every Israeli knew that, that they first had these Qassams that were very, primitive and simple and so on. But then they also started having Grad, right? And then they expanded, the fire, and it was also trivial that they are also shooting at the center and Tel Aviv and Jerusalem whenever they want. It means that they grew stronger. They used the time between the rounds of violence in order to accumulate weapons, and God knows what they have there. Okay, so I can tell you that many people were critical. I'm one among them. Every time that job was not done at the end of the military operation, 2014, I think that we lost the chance to just finish off the Hamas. This was expected. This was something that was discussed. But, I think that it was underestimation. We always believe that Hezbollah, it's the real enemy. And Hamas, it's, it's not very powerful terrorist organization. Yes, well, it's powerful enough to kill 1,000, and 200 and even more Israeli citizens and foreigners, and kidnap more than 250.
But now today we are in a situation where the war can take the same turn as in 2014, a ceasefire. How do you see this now?
Well, I see absolutely no way that after the current deal with hostages, which I pray that they will, all of them, come back to us, and I think that Israel has to pay any price, because it's civilians, it's not soldiers. Israel had to defend them, and it has to bring them home now, okay, whatever the price is. But when they will be released, and the ceasefire, it's a temporary ceasefire, when it will end, we will have to continue.
But it's more difficult than after the
yes.
ceasefire, and again, understand that, of course, for Hamas leaders, the talks about humanitarian needs is just a smokescreen, because they don't care for their populations. They want to rearm. Yes,
of course. They will regroup, they will rearm, and we will probably pay a tragic blood, for this regrouping, because, our soldiers are there. Our sons, our brothers, our husbands are there, and they will be more vulnerable. This is, a lot of parents contacted me as well as an ex-member of Knesset, asking what does it really mean if, there will be fire open the, in the direction of the soldiers. Can they even retaliate? Can they answer? I frankly don't know. I told them, listen, you have to talk to the IDF about it, about the procedure, but I understand the concern. Also, the boyfriend of our oldest daughter, he is a paratrooper, and he's been in Gaza now for more than a month. We didn't hear one word since still from him. And we know that he, just like all of the other men and women, are in danger right now, because we have to do it for the sake of our hostages. So this is a double price that we are paying, but unfortunately there is just no other way. There is no other way. Ceasefire, people who call for permanent ceasefire, they do not understand that Hamas intends to repeat what it did until now, the 7-10, but also the rocket fire, until they will get their way. And absolutely no way that we can allow this. So this is what the ceasefire means. Just cease the fire, Israel, but Hamas will get back to this as soon as they can.
And they are, of course, known for breaking the ceasefires. And as you said, what will be the engagement rules be? It's really, really dangerous for our soldiers and for their positions that they've gained in this horrible and very, very tragic war.
Listen, first of all, there was a ceasefire on 6/10. There was a ceasefire. So what we had until the massacre in the south, it was a ceasefire. If they wanted really to improve the well-being of their citizens, they could just continue with the ceasefire. And they would get more fuel, they would get more humanitarian aid. Actually, they got everything that they wanted. You are looking at the photos from Gaza from before the 7/10, and you see there everything. You see there girls, probably from the families of Hamas members, going, to the malls and having a nice, coffee breaks and all of that, So they had nice things there.
They had luxury cars and brand fashion shops.
For those
who could afford it.
Could afford it, yes. But there was the blockade that everybody is speaking about. Nobody understands, what is the meaning? It's so superficial to talk about, the Israelis, exercise the blockade. It's the blockade to prevent for Hamas rearm itself even more. Can you imagine if the seaways would be open, what kind of weapons would they get from the Iranians?
Well, but again, it's the border of Egypt that is very much open, although it's blocked for the movements of people, but obviously the weapons and the luxury cars could flow in easy.
So first of all, it's also not blocked for the people as well. And if you're looking at the past year, the previous year, 2022, then 200,000 Gazans went through this border. Of course, it depended on the Egyptians, but it also depended on the Hamas, Albert. This is something that people don't know. Hamas allowed their supporters to move freely, and they, of course, denied this right from people who opposed the Hamas or who were not among, their supporters. So this freedom of movement was very much also controlled by the Hamas itself internally. Also for the Egyptians, I can understand why they would, prevent from certain people to travel through Egypt, because they don't want people who are associated with terrorist activity to come, and God knows what to do there, because there is also Islamic groups, similar Islamic groups in Egypt as well.
Let's talk about Russia.
Yeah.
Now, you are well versed in all of these worlds. It seemed like Netanyahu and Putin had a special modus operandi, allowing Israel to take out Iranian assets in Syria, and now we see a very, very radical turn in the relations, do we?
It is a radical turn, but at the same time, I can tell you that every time things were a little bit rough. For example, in 2018, when the Syrians downed the Russian intelligence plane, and the Russians, of course, blamed Israel for that, because the Israeli plane was nearby, so said that, the Syrians were shooting at the Israelis, but they eventually, downed the Russian plane. I remember there was this, unbelievable flow of anti-Semitic rhetoric coming out from Russian media, and so on. It's like in one day they said, no problem, you can say whatever about Israel, and the Ministry of Defense, of course, and all of the other elements were very, very, very anti-Israeli, to the degree of being anti-Semitic. This is what is happening right now as well. It's like some of the media were getting, okay, green light, you can bash Israel, you can do whatever you want. When Russia needed to choose between Israel and Hamas, Israel is an ally of the United States, and it's not going to change. There could be some personal disagreements between leaders, but nevertheless, Israel is a firm ally of the United States. Nothing to win here. By supporting Hamas, Russia can get this, support of the Arab masses in the Arab world. In a way, it benefits from this support, because it says, listen, the Americans, they support the Jews. We support the Arabs. So this is how it's read across the world. So I think it was purely cynical. It's not out of love for Hamas. They understand very well what Hamas is, but they're looking at this big game, and there is no neutral position anymore in this game. You have to be in the one side or another side. They choose the other.
So the world has polarized, and it's really unfortunate to see this. I mean, I hear from my friends in Russia that the atmosphere has really changed. The Jewish friends, they say that their neighbors are looking at them with suspicion and talking behind their backs. And I mean, with all of this history of Russian anti-Semitism, it of course awakes a lot of concerns. Do you think it's an irreversible process that now has started in Russia?
Well, nothing is irreversible, but it very much depends on the people who are on top of this. So if you are looking at what happened in Dagestan, for example, yes, they almost lynch Israelis and Jews, and you're looking at it, you say, well, so it was all very known. Why did authorities did not prevent from something like this to happen? Who was else involved? What kind of what secret services were involved in this actually? You understand that if it's so easy for somebody to just like write in Telegram, guys, the Jews are arriving to Dagestan tonight, let's go and just like, beat them off. So it means that the hatred towards Jews is bubbling. And this is what's scary, because it was so easy to organize this crowd, mob, to go and to, allegedly, attack, this plane of Israelis and Jews that were coming back. And they attacked whom? They attacked Dagestani people who went to Israel for their medical purposes, for their kids. So this was really scary. Unfortunately, it's not an isolated case. With all of the rhetorics that you hear on Russian media, it's reasonable that people would say, okay, so these are the bad Jews, they're killing Palestinians, the aggressor. The rhetorics that we know also from the 60s and the 70s in the Soviet Union. And yes, this is very scary. It can stop, but this is the choice of the current leadership.
And it has been rolling down the hill, sadly to say. But again, it's strange to see how this conflict, you said it's polarized the world. America is for the Jews, and then Russia is for Arabs. But the whole world seems to have been stirred up. These big demonstrations, we see 500,000 people coming to London protesting Israel for Hamas. I mean, that's the scary part for me. I mean, you see the whole world kind of shaking in this hatred against the Jews. Still, if you're looking at the polls in the United States, but also in England, you don't see what you see, during these demonstrations of hate, where people also call for Islamic Caliphate to be created instead of England and the United States and so on. You still see massive support, for Israel and for the Jews. But unfortunately, so I can tell about England, because this is something that I also covered personally. After the terror attacks in the London Tube, it was in 2005. I was in London, and with a group of, we made, with my friends, documentary. It was called The Third World War Has Begun. It was about basically global terrorism, Islamic terrorism and so on. And we interviewed many people in England to understand what happened, because people who attacked, they were British. Homegrown.
Yeah, homegrown, so like, what is that? And they told me, listen, the people here do not understand. They confuse between the freedom of speech and the freedom to, perform jihad against the infidels, call for, introduce the Sharia law in Great Britain, and so on, Is this also part of the freedom of speech? This is, it's a philosophical question, but it's also a security question. Because if you allow these preachers, who also today, they preached at the demonstrations to say, listen, we don't need any Great Britain here. We need the great, how they called it, Confederation of Islamic States. Okay, so the union of the Islamic states, this is what we need to create instead of, all of these Western countries, and we are coming, okay? So then, look, this person educates children. This person educates students. So then what do you want? Would you expect that after a generation, what will happen? These children will become adults.
I was just talking to my wife about a book, 2015, I think. There was a French author that, I've forgotten the name of the author, but he wrote a book about Islam and submission. It's called Submission. And it's a fictitious story of how France is taken over by Islamist, radical Islam, and how the life is looking in the universities and how they are taking over. I mean, nowadays, it's not fictitious. You can very much predict it. You can see it almost happening.
Well, I don't know if they're there yet. And again, I have to stress, I do not have problem with Islam. I have problem with radical Islam, with the interpretation of Islam that permits to kill the infidels, to make the infidel women into sex slaves. This is the rhetoric of the ISIS, basically. And this is also the rhetoric, of Hamas or of similar groups. We have to differentiate between the two.
Of course.
We have to support the trend for moderation that is blowing right now from the countries like Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and Morocco and others, who promote, this moderation of basically of the speech.
Abrahamic Accords, you mentioned it earlier when we spoke. It was really a surprise to see, at least for me, the friendly attitude when we went to Dubai. But you, of course, you knew about these things happening before it became official.
Well, so I was also positively surprised by, the accord itself, because I knew that many things were happening. I also knew that the Israeli MFA was working for a long, long time on this, so this is like the iceberg. You see the tip of it, but, beneath the water, you have a lot of long, work that spread for, many years. And I do know that I was, in Dubai in 2006 for the first time. I met there so many Israelis who were doing business already back then. I know that the person who owns the Africa-Israel diamond empire, a business empire, Lev Levayev, he opened his boutique in Dubai in 2006. So there was this will, this desire to normalize the relations. But still, I was positively surprised because, I think that the Palestinian issue, it was difficult for them to overcome this, understanding that if we are doing this, that will be, received as traitors by the Palestinians. And this is exactly what, how the Palestinians, many Palestinians, received this news. Those are traitors, they don't care about us, and so on. I actually think that there is much more chance that we will be able to resolve, the conflict, or at least some part of it, with the help of the region. If we will have normal relations here across the Middle East, I think that it will also bring Israelis to the understanding that, we are among friends, we are not among enemies. And we will feel more secure to do, deals with the Palestinians, who obviously they are not going anywhere. We are not going anywhere. We will need to do some kind of a deal, but not with Hamas. Again, I'm ready to make deals with people who want to live next to me, but not with people who want to live here instead of me.
Well, I remember John Kerry saying, "Can't you go halfway?" So how do you go halfway with those who want to get rid of you?
Yes, no, you cannot. This is, in a way, it is an existential war. So not because Hamas is so powerful that it can destroy Israel, but because it clearly have intentions of breaching Israeli sovereignty and trumpet time and again. And there is a problem because it's not a state. It's a terror organization that is not obliging to any rules, and that's why sometimes it feels like they have an upper hand. And it's difficult, and we know that the United States had fought, with terrorism, globally, and there is no clear win here. There is no clean cut. That's the problem, So our friends need to understand it, that, it can last for years, and we will still be in the situation in which there will be rockets here and there, there will be attempts of infiltrations here and there, but I think that, we all need to understand Hamas has to go. This is clear. The vacuum there in Gaza has to be filled, with something else. If it's Palestinian autonomy, I don't know. It's really early to tell right now. But
looks like they are not really ready for that. But let me look at the bigger picture. I was a little bit concerned, when Netanyahu, our prime minister, was proclaiming at the UN the normalization talks with Saudis, and he started using this language like peace with the Arab world in our time, and yet the deal, as how I understand, I'm sure you know much more about it, was that the Saudi oil and gas and then Indian trade would go through Israel and would reach Europe and West much cheaper than the Russian, Iranian, because they have to go through Suez Canal and then pay exorbitant prices for the ships to go through it. So they definitely saw a danger. So couldn't we see it? Wasn't this something that made our leaders to think twice before saying these high, big slogans?
Well, I think that since we do know from intelligence that Hamas started to prepare for these horrendous attacks more than 1 year ago, so this was something that was in the making already. I think that there was perhaps more motivation to,
but also
exercise it.
I hear that we stopped the eavesdropping a year ago.
So yeah, so this is something that, again, this spectacular failure, which I think that after the war, it's clear that everybody that is part of this has to go. Of course, the prime minister, but of course, all of the heads of the security services, because I think that they already, assumed that the, accountability, and they said that, that they are in charge. They were in charge, and therefore they will have to pay the price, political price and otherwise. This is again, but it has to do with this feeling of arrogance, supremacy. Okay, so we are a really advanced country. We have this great army, which are very proud of, and so on. And our enemies, the primitive people from the, the Middle Ages. But no, our enemies are also sophisticated. They know how to use the modern technologies. They, for example, fundraised for them through the Bitcoin. Okay, so they know how to use this. They know how to use modern weapons, and they know more than anything that when you have a state that is a democratic state and it has to follow rules, international legitimacy, and so on, and they don't have to follow anything. So they can hide behind the civilians. Root themselves in hospitals, schools, and so on. Yes, the work is easier in a bit, for them. And for us, we have to be on alert all the time. I do not understand how it happened. I do not know how the girls who used to monitor the border, they warned of this. Many of them.
For months.
For months. I know this.
Yeah.
So I have spoken to a mother of one of them, and she told me, she's a Russian one, and she told me, listen, Karina, she warned us for many weeks. He said, there will be a war. You don't know what's going on. I cannot tell you, because it's military secret, but it's horrible. There is going to be a war. If she knew it, a 19-year-old girl who is now kidnapped in Gaza, so how come, the chief of staff, the head of military intelligence, the prime minister, how come they didn't know? It's tragic, and it always makes me cry even right now when I'm speaking about it, because innocent people paid their life, for these mistakes.
Now, you mentioned arrogance, and I do agree. We were complacent.
You have to be humble all the time. You have to be humble.
I think this is something that is so lacking even with our government now. But when you hear the reports that Russia maybe was helping to train the terrorists, or they were mentioning they were thankful for certain help, assistance. Now we are hearing that Hezbollah is maybe getting the air defense systems from Wagner. Mm-hmm. So what do you know about this?
Well, I frankly, for now, and it's been what's 46 days, I haven't seen yet evidence that Russia was involved in the preparations. Okay, so I think we have to be very responsible for the words that we say, because there is a lot of fake news going on. Some of the fake news, Russia is responsible for them, because, for example, they claimed that Ukraine had sold weapons to Hamas.
Of course, they blame Ukraine.
Of course, they will blame Ukraine. Of course, they say also for the pogrom in Makhachkala, they blame the Western intelligence, and all of that, instead of taking responsibility for what's happening in their country. But again, I haven't seen evidence, not even, like slightest evidence, that they knew, that they trained, and that they were involved. Frankly, my assessment was always that Russia, its interest in Palestinians, it's very superficial. Because, they were not really involved, not with the PA, also not with the Hamas. Not giving them money, and not giving them training, and not giving them even the vaccines, during the corona. Okay, so during the COVID, they gave just enough vaccines for the close circle of Abu Mazen and his people, but they didn't provide for, although they easily could do it, if they would wish to do it for Gaza and West Bank. So I do not think that, it's hard for me to believe that in all of this complexity and deep involvement of Iran, which is the first power you think of when you say, well, this was so well-prepared operation. Who, trained and who, helped? So Iranians, of course, say, no, we have nothing to do with it. And also, again, for this also, we didn't have the smoking gun yet. Okay, we don't know. But I think that between these two, I would say that Iran has everything to do with with training and perhaps also preparing the plan. As for the Russians and their intentions now, perhaps through Wagner, what is Wagner? Wagner was funded by the government. It's not some independent player. So when there is a report that Wagner wants to sell or to Iran or to Hezbollah some air defense, you have to read that it's Russia that wants to supply to them air defense. That's it.
And of course, we have to remember from 2015, there is a strong Russian military presence in Syria.
Yes.
So we cannot ignore these facts that just how many? 270, 300 kilometers from us, we have their air forces.
Yes, there is, of course, Russian presence. By the way, there was some mistaken thinking, again, the conception, wrong conception, that Russia perhaps will help Israel to chase away the Iranians. No, it will never happen. There is the division of power between Russians and Iranians and Syrians. In Syria, you have the Iranians as a bottom layer, the soldiers, the militias, and so on, who do the control over the territory, who help Assad to regain control and to stay in power. And Russia is the air force. So it's not one instead of the other. It's two that help Assad to maintain his grip over Syria. So there is no contradiction that I see between these powers. I do see contradiction with our interests. And this is unfortunately not much that we can do. But frankly, Albert, I do not think that even their presence in Syria should interfere with the Israeli calculation of supporting Ukraine on a wider scale than we did for now. So I'm not speaking about specific types of weapons that should be supplied to them, because I'm not a military expert. I cannot tell you what suits more the Ukrainian needs from, the inventory that we have. Okay, but I can tell you that we could state much more firmly and to say, listen, we are standing with the United States, with the Western world, because we belong to this camp. It's necessity to recognize. And I think that also now, there should not be a question of who the West should support, Israel or Ukraine. We are in this boat together, so we are fighting against these powers of destruction, anti-democratic powers, dangerous powers. And I think that it should be all interconnected.
Ksenia, I'm missing you in the Knesset, so are you planning to go back?
Well, I'm very happy with the work that I do for now in the Atlantic Council, also in Herzliya, where I teach. I lead the organization that is called ROPES. It's a regional organization for peace, economics, and security. We bring together moderate Israelis, Palestinians, and leaders from the Arab world in order to build a better future. I think that I can also contribute a lot, in this civilian life. And not only in the political, which is much more turbulent.
Well,
yeah.
But I think we miss your voice in the Knesset. So I think, at least I think, you should go back and let the wisdom that you have sound in the Knesset.
Thank you very much, Albert.
Well, we are really thankful to you, Ksenia, for coming today and sharing. We will have a special event on the 29th of November. We want to invite all our friends all over the world, and we have millions of people that will watch and join us online on the 29th of November, the historic date of the UN vote 76 years ago. But we will go to the Knesset and we will have a day of support and prayer, because we will have the Speaker of the Congress send his prayer and his speech of support, and many other congressmen and senators and governors and members of parliament.
I can tell you that we in Israel need the support a lot in light of what is going on and these demonstrations of hate and rising anti-Semitism. We really need this.
We need you, dear friends, out in the public squares, in the public places, Instagram, Twitter, standing with us, standing with Israel. I mean, we need more time to get the job done. And as Ksenia very well said, there cannot be any deals with those who want to annihilate you. We have to find a different solution. And remember, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They who love Jerusalem will prosper. Those who bless the seed of Abraham will be blessed. Remember to join us on the 29th of November from the Knesset, and every day here, the Friends of Zion Museum at 1 o'clock. So, shalom from Jerusalem.
Shalom.